I never thought my stepdad's downfall would start with a knock at the front door, and a whisper from someone I hadn't seen since high school. But when I opened it and saw Betty standing there, nervous, hands trembling, eyes darting around like she'd just outrun something, I felt something shift. Something in my gut clenched tight, like I already knew this was going to crack everything open. "Your mom home?" she asked, voice barely louder than the wind. "I need to tell her something. But, she can't say it came from me." I didn't know it then, but that was the moment our family started plotting. Not just against a man, but against everything he tried to take from us. It's weird, how the small things stick with you. The way Chris used to hum that same two-note tune every time he walked into the house. The way his boots always squeaked on the hallway linoleum, even after we told him to leave them by the door. At first, those were signs of comfort, routine. Now, I realized they were warnings I ignored. Let me back up. My name's Tyler. I'm 24 now, but this story started in my late teens, right after my mom's long and draining divorce from my biological dad. That man? He drained her dry over 25 years. Emotional manipulation, cold silences, and the kind of pressure that doesn't bruise skin but wears down your bones. When she finally got out, she was different. Lighter, in some ways. Hollow, in others. That's when she brought Chris home. She worked in the county jail, tough job, tougher woman. Chris had been in for a DUI, but she met him after he was out. That alone should have had me raising questions, but she smiled when she talked about him. That was rare. So I shut up. My brother, Noah, didn't say much either. He was only a year younger than me, quieter. My sister, Jess, was the oldest, 30 now, but she had her own stuff going on. She showed up for holidays, birthdays, and when Mom really needed her. The three of us had weathered our own storms with Mom, and we weren't about to lecture her on how to pick up the pieces. Chris seemed okay at first. Kind of charming, if you looked past the stale beer breath that lingered too often. He played video games, had dumb jokes, and knew how to cook decent fried eggs. Nothing impressive, but nothing dangerous either. Then came the day he disappeared. I remember pacing by the window, phone in hand, glancing at the clock like that would make him show up faster. He had gone to a probation check-in at the courthouse. It wasn't supposed to take long. 2 hours passed. Then 3. Then the call came. He was in Texas. We thought it was a joke. He said the FBI had grabbed him the second he walked in. Some ancient connection to his family down there, some shady deal gone sideways, and suddenly he was looking at serious charges. Not for what he did, but for what he might have known. He cut a deal. He'd testify against his own family in exchange for a lighter sentence. They'd let him out, for now, but he had to stay quiet and clean. Mom clutched the phone to her chest when she told us, her hands shaking like she couldn't hold the weight of the news. But she stayed loyal. She sent him money. Took his calls. Even planned their wedding for when he got out. He came back a year later. Skinny. Eyes a little more sunken. Jumpy. But Mom didn't care. She decorated the house with balloons, made his favorite dinner, cried when he walked through the door like he was a soldier home from war. But what came back with him wasn't love. It was something festering. And it started to leak into everything. It began with the drinking. At first, it was 1 or 2 beers after work. Then a 6-pack. Then more. He'd crack open the cans before noon on weekends. He wasn't loud or violent, not in the traditional sense. But his words started cutting. He'd insult Mom in little ways, make jokes that weren't funny, call her sensitive when she winced. He'd blast the TV at night, and if she asked him to lower it, he'd say something like, "It's my house too." Except it wasn't. The lease was in her name. Always had been. Still, she made excuses for him. He's stressed, she'd say. He's trying to stay clean for the trial. She wanted so badly to believe he was redeemable. But I saw it. So did Noah. So did Jess. Then came the night everything snapped. He stumbled in close to midnight, slurring his words, stinking like sour beer and sweat. Mom was waiting. Arms crossed, voice low, too calm. "Chris," she said. "You've been drinking again." He tried to deny it, but even he knew it was pointless. He waved her off, muttered something cruel under his breath. I didn't catch it, but I saw the way her face fell, just slightly. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. She just said, "Get out." He didn't fight. Just grabbed his coat and slammed the door behind him. The next morning, Mom asked me and Noah to help bag up some of his stuff. Essentials, clothes, chargers, toiletries. "He can pick them up later," she said. "With a police escort." That was when Betty knocked. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red, face pale. She asked to speak to Mom alone. They sat on the worn-out couch in the living room while I stood awkwardly near the kitchen, pretending not to listen, but catching every word. She said she worked with Chris. Same DQ, different roles. He was the manager. She was a shift lead. And for months, she'd watched something unfold behind the walls of the store no one wanted to admit. Chris was seeing someone else. A woman named Darla. A little older, not from town. He'd bring her into the back office. Sometimes they'd sneak into the walk-in cooler. Betty had caught them. More than once. She said Chris warned her, threatened to fire her if she said anything. And now, Darla was pregnant. I couldn't breathe. I felt the weight of those words crawl down my spine like ice water. Mom just sat there. Silent. Still. Then, without a word, she stood, grabbed the rest of Chris's boxes, and tossed them all into the alley. Every sock, every controller, every souvenir mug. Gone. That night, she called him. I didn't hear the whole conversation. Just her side. She didn't shout. Didn't curse. She asked questions, quiet, precise ones. And then she said, "You'll never come near this house again." She hung up and turned to us. "We're done," she said. But we weren't. Not yet. Jess came over the next morning, coffee in one hand, her old baseball bat in the other. "I say we do something," she said, calmly, like she was suggesting a movie night. "You don't treat our mom like that and walk away clean." I could see the fire behind her eyes. Noah nodded. And I didn't even hesitate. We weren't interested in revenge for the thrill of it. We wanted closure. Consequences. A way to erase the fingerprints he'd left all over our lives. And so, the unraveling began. First thing we did. We called Chris's boss. Now, let me explain something about this Dairy Queen. It wasn't just a fast food joint. It was a small-town empire. The owner, Dave, ran half a dozen of them in the area and knew everyone by name. Chris had worked his way into Dave's good graces after prison, said all the right things, worked the right shifts, played the role of a reformed man. But Dave? He hated mess. And what Chris had going on? It was messier than a melted blizzard in July. Jess made the call. She always had a way of talking like a storm was coming even when her voice was soft. Told Dave everything, calmly, factually. No drama. Just the truth. Chris had been using his office for personal business, threatening employees to keep them quiet, and dragging his dirty laundry right through the front door of Dave's store. The pause on the other end was long. "I'll handle it," Dave finally said. And he did. By the end of the week, Chris was out. Fired. Banned from all of Dave's stores. No fanfare, no final paycheck, just a firm reminder that people do talk, even when you tell them not to. And Betty? She got promoted. Store manager. Jess bought her a cupcake to celebrate. But that wasn't the end of him. He moved in with Darla. Her place was a small house in a town about an hour away. Somehow, he managed to snag another job at a DQ out there. We were stunned. How could someone with his track record keep slipping through cracks like that? Noah, ever the quiet planner, said, "He hasn't hit the bottom yet. But he will." We waited. We didn't send rumors. We sent facts. I called the franchise owner for the new town. Told him, politely but firmly, about Chris's prior behavior. Explained what he did at the last store. Gave names. Timelines. Said I wasn't trying to stir drama, just didn't want someone else's team to go through what Betty had. The owner thanked me. Said he'd keep an eye out. That part took longer. Chris must have known we were watching, because he laid low. No mistakes. Just silence. Until the car. It was late September, just after dinner. Mom and I were watching some home renovation show, our legs covered in paint-stained blankets, when she stiffened. "That's Darla's car." I looked out the window. Sure enough, there it was, same make, same color, same dent on the back passenger side. Circling. Slowly. Again. And again the next night. And again the night after. He was driving without a license. We knew he was. After his Texas deal, his driving privileges were still suspended. He didn't have a license when he lived here. Never needed one. We drove him everywhere. Now he was cruising our street, windows down, elbow out like he had nothing to lose. He was getting sloppy. We made the call. Cops said they couldn't do much unless they saw it themselves, but told us to notify them next time we spotted the car. So we waited. 3 nights later, Jess saw him. 10:42 p.m. She called it in, gave the make, model, direction. I watched the whole thing unfold from the upstairs window, how the police car turned the corner without sirens, quiet as a shadow, then lit up the whole street in red and blue. Pulled him over halfway down the block. We didn't know everything until the next day. They'd pulled him over for driving without a license. That alone would have gotten him in trouble. But what they found during the stop. That sealed it. He'd been drinking. Again. And inside Darla's home, when they searched it, officers found something even worse. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that kind of equipment. Felons aren't allowed to be around certain items, not even if they're just in the house. Darla's place had them. That meant more violations. He went back into custody, just like that. Darla gave birth while he was locked up. From what we heard through a mutual acquaintance, she cut contact a few weeks later. Moved back in with her sister. Filed for child support. Chris wrote to my mom from jail. Letters every week. Messy handwriting, pages that smelled like old ink and desperation. Some were apologies. Some were weirdly poetic. Others were full of accusations. "You set me up, you never loved me, this is your fault." Mom read the first one. Then she started burning them in the sink, one by one. I stood next to her the third time, watching the paper curl in on itself like it was embarrassed to exist. We moved not long after. Out of state. Bought a place in a quieter neighborhood, one where nobody knew our story. Jess and Noah both found new jobs, better ones. I stayed with Mom, helping her fix up the house, replacing cabinets, learning how to live in silence again. Sometimes, I still think about the knock on the door that started it all. About Betty's voice shaking. About the way Mom's face looked when she heard the name Darla for the first time. And I wonder, how many other people are out there, keeping quiet because someone told them to? We weren't just reclaiming our lives. We were setting a boundary. Loud and clear. You don't get to tear through someone's family and walk away untouched. When people talk about moving on, they make it sound like flipping a switch, like one morning you wake up, the air's clearer, and suddenly the past doesn't feel like it's wrapped around your ribs anymore. That's not how it works. You carry it. Even in the new house, with its pale yellow walls and half-finished kitchen, I still found myself walking quieter at night. Still half expecting to hear the scratch of boots across tile. Still pausing at the front window every time a car slowed down outside. Mom said she didn't think about him anymore. But I'd see the way her fingers trembled when sorting through mail. How she locked the door twice instead of once. She'd never say it, but she was waiting, for him to show up again, or for the damage he left to sneak back in through the cracks. So we patched the cracks. Literally. Weekends became construction therapy. Sanding cabinets. Replacing tiles. Scraping off layers of someone else's old paint so we could start fresh. I learned to measure things twice. Mom learned to laugh again. Jess visited often, sometimes with her girlfriend, sometimes just her. She'd bring wine, snacks, a lot of "did you see what he posted now?" gossip she swore she wasn't checking for, but definitely was. Noah, always the quiet one, was the only one who hadn't blocked Chris online. He said he wanted to track the fallout. That was his term, fallout. Like Chris was a wrecked satellite slowly burning up on re-entry, scattering pieces across Kansas. And then came the Facebook post. It was a screenshot Jess sent me at 2 a.m. I remember it because my phone lit up on the nightstand, and the glow alone gave me a weird jolt of panic. Chris had posted a long, rambling status. Paragraphs of complaints. Rants about the system. About people who ruin lives. About how child support was a scam, and how some women trap men with kids they never wanted. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. He didn't say our names either, but the venom was aimed our way. I knew it. Jess knew it. Noah, of course, replied with a single comment, "Keep talking. We're watching." He deleted it within an hour. But it was too late. That comment set something off. Messages started rolling in, from people we didn't know, and people we'd forgotten we did. One from a girl I vaguely remembered from school. Was this the same guy who worked at the Shell station in 2019? Because if so, you might want to know something. And then another. And another. Each message painted the same picture, Chris, in different places, different roles, always with the same pattern. Charm. Chaos. Control. People had stories. Things they'd seen. Things they'd kept to themselves. Some were small, unpaid rent, shady side hustles. Others were harder to swallow. One message stood out. It was from someone named Ray. She said she used to date Chris back before he ever met our mom. Didn't last long, she wrote. He didn't like it when I had boundaries. She attached a photo. Grainy. Old. But unmistakably him, same face, same smug smirk. She said he left town suddenly after someone called him out for stealing from the place he worked. It all felt familiar. Recycled. Mom read through the messages in silence. Then she stood up, walked to the kitchen, and started peeling carrots like it was the only way to stay upright. "You know what the worst part is?" she said, without looking at me. I believed in him. Not in a fairy tale way. In a stubborn way. Like if I believed hard enough, he had to be better. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. She kept peeling. I think I needed him to be decent. Because if he wasn't, what does that say about me? The carrots hit the counter with a dull thud. We didn't need to answer. What we did next wasn't about vengeance anymore. Not even about justice. It was about making sure the next person didn't end up like her. Like us. Jess took the lead again. She had this file. Thick manila folder, filled with every printout, message, photo, timeline. Everything we'd collected. She mailed it, anonymously, to Chris's current landlord. To the company where he'd applied for another job. To Darla's lawyer, whose name she got from a court site. Quietly. Carefully. No fanfare. He didn't know it was us. That was the beauty of it. And then, silence again. For a while, things were quiet. Really quiet. Mom started seeing someone new, a guy named Steve who sold plumbing supplies and loved jazz. He called her darlin' in a way that didn't sound fake. She smiled more. We repainted the living room a soft green. I wish I could say that was the end. But healing isn't a straight line. One afternoon, Mom came home holding a small package. No return address. Just her name in shaky handwriting. Inside? One of Chris's letters. Unopened. Somehow, it had followed us. Maybe he'd found our new address. Maybe it was forwarded by mistake. But the second she saw it, I saw something in her crumble. She didn't cry. Just walked to the sink, ripped the envelope in half, and tossed it under the running water. "This is the last one," she said. "No more shadows." But the thing about shadows is, they stretch. Especially when you're finally trying to live in the light. We didn't talk much that night. Mom made tea. I stood in the doorway, watching the steam curl around her fingers. She stared into the mug like it might give her answers. Maybe she was waiting for one more knock, one more ghost from the past to crawl through the mail slot. I hated how easily he could still pull her back with a scrap of paper. Noah came by around 9. Jess called twice. We didn't tell them about the letter until the next morning. "You sure it was his handwriting?" Noah asked. "I could recognize it in a lineup," Mom said flatly. "It was him." He nodded once. That was all. Jess, though, she cracked her knuckles like she was gearing up for a fistfight. "He finds our address again, I will make it a legal issue." Mom didn't say no. For a few weeks, we kept a tighter routine. Double-checking the locks. Watching for unknown cars. Noah even installed a video doorbell. And then one night, we saw it. Not Chris, no. But his son. The camera caught a kid, maybe 6 or 7, riding a too-small bike down our street. He stopped right at the edge of our driveway. Got off. Walked up to the porch. Looked around. Then he left a folded piece of paper under the mat. It wasn't threatening. Just confusing. The note said, "My dad told me you were mean." "Are you?" In thick, uneven crayon letters. No name, no return address. We stared at it in silence, the 4 of us crowded around the screen. "I don't think he sent the kid here," Jess said eventually. "But he's filling his head with lies." "That's what scared men do," Mom muttered. "They turn their mess into stories." We didn't respond to the note. But we kept it. Because what do you do when the past finds a way to walk on 2 small legs and knock on your door? It haunted us more than we wanted to admit. Days passed. Then weeks. And slowly, we started breathing again. The mail was normal. The neighbors waved. The nights were quiet. Too quiet sometimes, but I guess that's what peace feels like when you're not used to it. Mom's new boyfriend, Steve, started leaving his toothbrush at our place. That's when I knew she was actually, truly moving on. I saw her laugh at his dumb puns and lean into him at dinner like she'd never been bruised by someone else's silence. That made me want to believe again, even if just a little. One day, I got a message from a name I didn't recognize. The profile picture was blurry. No mutual friends. The message was short, "You don't know me, but I think we need to talk about Chris." I stared at it for a full minute. It felt like a trap. But curiosity? It's a disease. So I replied. "What about him?" The typing bubble popped up. Then disappeared. Then came back. Then stayed. She said her name was Lacey. She was dating Chris now. Or had been. It was complicated. She didn't know what to believe anymore. "He talks about your mom all the time," she said. "Like she ruined his life. But he also says she was the best woman he ever had." That contradiction alone told me everything I needed. Then came the real reason she messaged. "He said your family spread lies about him. That you made stuff up." But then I found something in his closet, letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to your mom. Some were sweet. Some were not. One scared me. She sent a photo. The letter was angry, scrawled in dark ink, with underlined words and arrows pointing to phrases like, you never saw me, and you made me do this. I felt my mouth go dry. He hadn't sent that one. Just written it. Kept it. Hidden it. He told me he was better now, Lacey said. But when I told him I wanted space, he started acting strange. Paranoid. Kept checking the windows. Talking about someone finishing the job. My hands were shaking. I asked her where she was. She didn't give an address. Just said she lived near Wichita. That he wasn't staying with her anymore. That he'd left after an argument and hadn't come back for 3 days. That was the last she heard from him. Until now. She said he'd left behind a box. Full of things. Photos. Notes. Old IDs. She offered to mail them to me, said she didn't want to keep anything connected to him anymore. I gave her a P.O. box address. Not our home. I wasn't that careless. The box came a week later. I opened it in the garage, with Noah and Jess standing nearby. It smelled like mildew and dust. The contents felt like someone's shadow in physical form: faded receipts, pocket knives, an old Game Boy, a cracked phone with no charger, and at the bottom, the letters. I didn't read most of them. I couldn't. But one caught my eye. It wasn't to Mom. It was to his son. I hope you're strong, it read. Stronger than the people who raised you. I didn't know if it was supposed to be a warning or a curse. But it made me realize something I hadn't admitted until then. Chris wasn't done. Not with us. Not with the past. And maybe, not even with himself. I should have thrown the box away. Buried it. Burned it. Anything but keep it. But I didn't. I left it sealed up in the corner of the garage, half covered with an old tarp, like some cursed relic we weren't supposed to touch. A box of fragments, broken timelines, and rot he left behind. And somehow, it still felt like he had a grip on the room. A few nights later, Mom had a nightmare. She doesn't usually talk in her sleep, but that night she cried out, once, sharp and panicked, and when I ran into her room, I found her sitting upright, trembling. Her face was pale, hair damp with sweat, clutching the edge of the blanket like she was holding on to the edge of a cliff. I sat down on the edge of her bed and didn't say anything. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Then she whispered, he was in the house. It wasn't real. She knew it. But it felt real. And sometimes, that's worse. He was standing in the kitchen, she said. Looking through the window. And then, he was inside. Just standing there. Smiling. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The silence said everything. We didn't sleep much that night. We sat in the living room drinking cold tea, watching the sky shift from black to pale gray. Every creak in the floor, every gust of wind outside, made us flinch. That morning, Jess drove over without warning. She had a bag slung over her shoulder and a look in her eyes like she was done playing nice. We're calling someone, she said. Not the police. Not friends. Someone who can dig. Noah raised an eyebrow. You want to hire a PI? Jess nodded. Not to spy on him. I want a timeline. A real one. What he's been doing, where he's been. I want facts. Not rumors. I want to know what he's planning. That's what scared her the most. Not what he'd done, but what he might still be holding back. I was hesitant at first. I wasn't sure digging deeper would help. But something in the way Mom avoided the kitchen window told me we needed to do something. So we found a guy. Name was Carter. Retired cop turned private investigator, the kind who wears cheap suits and doesn't blink enough. Jess said he came highly recommended from a friend who'd used him in a custody case. We gave him what we had: names, old addresses, phone numbers. The letter from Lacey. The box of junk. He took it all in without reacting. Just nodded, took notes, said he'd call in a week. And when he did, everything changed. Chris wasn't in Kansas anymore. He'd moved again. Quietly. No forwarding address, no paper trail. Carter found a digital footprint, though, someone using his old email to apply for jobs in Colorado Springs. An apartment lease with a name one letter off from his. And a single flagged incident, a welfare check requested by a neighbor who said she heard yelling through the vents for 3 nights in a row. No arrests. No charges. But a note on the report, male resident refused to open door. Claimed he was alone. Officer noted signs of visible agitation. Door was reinforced from the inside. Mom stared at that sentence for a long time. Reinforced, she whispered. Why? Nobody answered. Carter gave us one last update before closing the case. Chris wasn't working. Not consistently. He was bouncing between jobs, handyman work, small gigs. Paid in cash. Always moving. No social media presence. No traceable phone number. A ghost with a driver's license. Noah said, he's unraveling. I disagreed. He's hiding. That realization came with a new kind of fear. Not the fear of being watched, but the fear that he was waiting. For something. For someone. Then, something small, but unsettling, happened. Mom's car alarm went off at 3:17 a.m. We ran outside. Nothing was missing. No signs of forced entry. The doors were locked. But the driver's side mirror had been tilted down, all the way, like someone had adjusted it manually. And on the windshield? A single penny. Face down. It could have been a prank. Could have been nothing. But I knew better. Chris had this weird thing with pennies. Said they were messenger coins. Used to leave them in strange places. Behind light switches. Under coffee cups. In coat pockets. Always face down. Said it sent a message. Jess said, I swear to God, if I find him near this house, I'll drag him into court myself. We filed a police report. Not much they could do without proof. They recommended a motion camera, more lighting, a neighborhood watch. We did all of it. But what kept me up that night wasn't the penny. It was the silence. The kind that builds pressure in your chest, like the pause before something breaks. Because I realized, we'd built our lives on the assumption that Chris was finished. That the worst was over. But what if we'd only scratched the surface? What if he was just beginning? A week after the penny, we found the second one. This time, it was under the welcome mat. Same position, face down. Not dirty, not old. Brand new, as if it had just been placed minutes before. No footprints. No tire marks. No knock on the door. It just appeared. I didn't say anything to Mom right away. She'd been sleeping a little better, smiling a little more. I didn't want to take that from her. But Jess found out, she always did, and her reaction was instant. We're not waiting for the third one. That's how she framed it. Like it was a countdown. She wasn't wrong. Noah and I went over every inch of the front yard. Checked the cameras. Nothing. It was like whoever left it knew exactly where the blind spot was. That night, I stayed up on the couch. Coffee in hand. Lights off. Waiting. By 3 a.m, I was still staring out the window, eyes burning. At one point, I thought I saw movement across the street, just a flicker. A person standing near the edge of a mailbox. But when I blinked, it was gone. Noah joined me at 4. We're not paranoid, he said quietly. He wants us to think we are. Then he asked something that chilled me more than anything yet. What if it's not just about Mom anymore? That landed hard. Because up until that moment, we'd treated this like her story. Her past. Her ex. But we'd all been in it. All of us had touched the fire, even if she was the one who got burned the worst. Now the flames were licking at our door. 2 days later, Jess called. She sounded off. There's a Reddit thread, she said. I frowned. A what? A thread. Posted under a throwaway. The title is, When Your Ex's Family Ruins Your Life on Purpose, AMA. She paused. It's him. I opened the link. Read through it. He never used names. Never specifics. But it was obvious to anyone who knew. He painted himself as the victim. A reformed man, betrayed by the woman who used him, then discarded him. Said her kids turned his friends against him, got him fired, made sure he was blackballed from every town he entered. Said he'd lost everything. There were paragraphs of rambling, scattered thoughts. Then a line that froze my blood. People don't realize what a man becomes when you take away everything he's rebuilt with his own hands. They think he just disappears. But sometimes, he watches. Noah was already drafting a report to Reddit's admin team. Jess started screenshotting everything. I just sat there, reading that sentence over and over, feeling like I'd swallowed a stone. Sometimes, he watches. What did that mean? Was he nearby? Had he been nearby all this time? We checked our cameras again. Nothing. That night, the third penny showed up. This one wasn't outside. It was inside. I found it on the bathroom sink, after brushing my teeth, after turning away for just a second. I swear it wasn't there when I walked in. And I knew, without a doubt, I had locked the door. That's when it snapped for me. This wasn't fear anymore. It was war. Jess wanted to confront him directly. Noah wanted to tighten security. I wanted to vanish, just take Mom and disappear for good. But Mom? She surprised us. I'm not leaving, she said. Not again. I've run enough. He doesn't get to chase me out of my own life. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were steel. So we stayed. But we planned. Jess got in touch with Carter again, our PI, and gave him the thread. The screenshots. The pattern. The pennies. She said something was coming, and we needed to be ready for it. He agreed. Carter traced the Reddit account through metadata. Said it matched a device last used in Boulder, Colorado. New burner phone. New location. Same ghost. Then, just like that, gone again. The account was deleted. Every post vanished. Except, people had already seen it. Shared it. Some even believed it. There were comments calling him brave. Calling us vindictive. Saying, women always twist the story. Jess almost threw her phone across the room. That's when Mom stood up, walked to the garage, pulled out the box we'd tried to forget, and opened it. Inside, under the layers of garbage and forgotten things, was one more letter. Still sealed. It was addressed to me. Not Mom. Not Jess. Not Noah. Me. I held it in my hands, trying to decide what to do. Jess told me not to read it. Noah said to burn it. Mom just watched. But I needed to know. So I opened it. It wasn't long. Just a few sentences. You were always the quiet one. The one who paid attention. You think you've won. But I'm patient. I'm very patient. I'll see you soon, Tyler. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. I sat there, the letter shaking in my hands, the room spinning slowly around me. This wasn't over. This wasn't even close. The worst part wasn't the letter. It was the handwriting. Because it wasn't just his, it was my name in his handwriting. He'd written it before. On old birthday cards. Grocery lists. Little sticky notes he used to leave on the fridge like, Tyler, clean the sink if you use it. His scrawl was always the same. A little too sharp. Letters leaning forward like they were about to tip over. Seeing my name written like that again felt like someone had whispered into my ear from behind. I didn't say anything at first. Just folded the letter up, slid it back into the envelope, and walked upstairs. Sat on my bed. Stared at the ceiling. Noah came in an hour later. Didn't knock. Just sat on the floor by the door, arms draped over his knees. Is it bad? He asked. I nodded. He didn't push for more. We stayed there for a while. No TV. No music. Just silence, and the sound of a thunderstorm starting outside, low rumbles like the sky grinding its teeth. Eventually, he said, you know what gets me? He could have disappeared. He had the chance. After the jail time. After Darla. After all of it. He could have just gone. Yeah, I said. But then he wouldn't be in control. And that's what this was. Not revenge. Not justice. Control. He didn't want Mom back. He didn't want us to forgive him. He wanted us beneath him. Afraid. Waiting. That night, I slept with a hammer under my bed. Didn't tell Mom. Didn't tell Jess. The next morning, the fourth penny showed up. This time, it was in the mailbox. Taped to the back wall inside, hidden from view unless you reached in deep. Jess found it. She brought it inside with gloves, like it was radioactive. Dropped it on the table like evidence. Okay, she said. We need to move. Noah frowned. You think he knows where we live again? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. We called Carter. He agreed to come by the house the next day, walk us through security upgrades, check for trackers, anything he could think of. When he showed up, it was already raining. He went over everything, windows, locks, doorbell camera, router security. He brought a signal detector and swept our cars, our phones, even the inside of the mailbox. Nothing. No bugs. No trackers. No fingerprints on the penny. But he paused before he left. You ever seen the movie The Strangers? He asked. Jess made a face. Seriously? He shrugged. Just saying. That line always stuck with me. Because you were home. Sometimes that's the only reason people show up. Just to see if they can. Then he gave us something we didn't ask for, a small, handheld panic alarm. Not because you'll need it, he said. But because if you do, you won't have time to look for it. The house felt different that night. Not unsafe. Just aware of itself. The walls seemed to hum. The floors creaked more. Or maybe I was just listening harder. At 2:53 a.m., the back porch light flickered on. No footsteps. No wind. No animals. Just the light. It shut off 10 seconds later. I checked the footage the next morning. Nothing. A flash of static. Then black. The next day, I got a phone call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. When I did, I didn't say anything. Just waited. At first, there was silence. Then, breathing. Steady. Measured. A little raspy, like someone trying to keep calm. I hung up. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Same number. I didn't pick up. I told Jess. She called the number back immediately. It rang twice, then disconnected. No voicemail. No tone. We reported it. Again. The police filed it under harassment. Gave us the usual, stay alert, document everything, call if it escalates. It had already escalated. A week passed. No pennies. No letters. No calls. Then one afternoon, I was at the hardware store grabbing paint when my phone buzzed. A motion alert from the front door cam. I opened it. There he was. Chris. Just standing there. Not doing anything. Not holding anything. Just standing at the edge of the porch, hands in his pockets, like he'd come to ask for sugar. He didn't ring the bell. Didn't knock. He looked directly into the camera. Smiled. Then walked away. When I saw his face on that screen, something inside me cracked. Not like a glass breaking, something deeper. Like a support beam in your spine giving way. I dropped the paint cans right there in the aisle. Walked out without even paying. My legs didn't feel connected to the floor. I was floating, moving without thinking, barely hearing anything except that one moment repeating in my head. That smile. I'd seen it before. Too many times. It wasn't warm, it wasn't friendly. It was hollow. Like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror 100 times and still hadn't figured out how real people do it. I called Jess from the parking lot. No answer. Called Noah. He picked up on the first ring. He was here, I said. Silence. What do you mean here? Noah's voice sharpened fast. He was on our porch, I said. He looked at the camera. He smiled. By the time I got home, Jess was already there. Mom was pacing in the kitchen. Her lips were pressed tight, arms folded across her chest like she was trying to hold herself in. I pulled up the footage. We watched it together. 4 times. Nobody said a word. Noah called Carter. Again. This time, Carter didn't suggest lights or locks. He said, "You want a restraining order?" Jess said, "We want him gone." Easier said than done. The footage wasn't threatening enough. Not legally. He didn't approach the door. Didn't say anything. Didn't break anything. Didn't do anything. But we knew better. Because when someone like Chris shows up, just being there is a threat. We filed the report anyway. Police took a statement. Said they'd keep an eye out. Standard protocol. Mom's hands were shaking the whole time. I had to finish her sentences. That night, I didn't sleep. None of us did. Every sound was a trigger. Every gust of wind, every shifting shadow across the hallway. It was like the house had turned against us, every corner suddenly unfamiliar, every hallway colder than it used to be. At 3:12 a.m., there was a knock on the front door. 3 taps. Slow. Even. Jess bolted upright on the couch. Noah was already halfway down the stairs, barefoot and wild-eyed. I was frozen. Mom didn't move. We waited, breath held tight in our chests. Another knock. Same rhythm. Jess crept toward the peephole. She looked. Then looked again. "There's no one there," she whispered. I checked the camera. Nothing. I don't mean no face, I mean no movement. No change. No blip. Like the knock had happened in a pocket of time the camera didn't exist in. Noah opened the door fast. Stepped outside. Nothing. No cars. No footsteps. No breeze. But taped to the doorframe? Another penny. Face down. By now, we weren't just scared. We were suffocating. You can't live like that for long. Can't walk around your own home with your spine tight and your jaw locked. We tried to act normal during the day, work, errands, dinners, but everything had an edge. Even the jokes had shadows under them. Steve, Mom's boyfriend, started picking up on it. He wasn't stupid. One night he pulled me aside and said, "You all move like the walls are closing in." He didn't ask questions. He just stayed over more often after that. And he always brought his toolbox. I respected that. A few nights later, I was in the backyard, just existing. Couldn't be inside. Couldn't sit still. I kept replaying the knock over and over in my head. Then I saw something by the back fence. At first, I thought it was trash, maybe a bag or a fallen shirt. But when I got closer, I realized it was a notebook. Small. Black cover. Dirty from rain. It was just sitting there. Like someone had dropped it and never came back. I picked it up. Inside, notes. Pages of them. Disjointed, frantic scribbles. Not all in Chris's handwriting. Some were messier. Some were printed in block letters. But there was one line that repeated every few pages. They don't see what I see. It was a mess of dates, names, thoughts, like someone trying to map out a conspiracy only they understood. Some of the entries mentioned Mom. Others? Us. Me. Jess. Noah. I saw the older boy at the store. He didn't see me. Not yet. I heard her laugh. It sounded fake. Like she was trying too hard. She doesn't miss me. Not really. They want me to disappear. But I am the story. I flipped through the pages until I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a notebook. It was a manifesto. And it had been dropped right next to our fence. Like a breadcrumb. Like an invitation. I didn't show it to Mom. Not yet. I took it to Jess and Noah first. Their faces said everything. Jess said, if we don't stop him now, he's not going to stop himself. We debated for hours. What to do. Who to tell. Whether to burn the damn thing or take it to the police. Jess wanted to go full courtroom drama. March the notebook into the precinct and slam it on the desk like it was a warrant. Noah was more cautious. He wanted to scan it, copy every page, and send it to Carter first. Let's be smart, he said. If we play this too loud, Chris might disappear again. This might be our only thread. Me? I didn't say much. I was too busy thinking about that line. They want me to disappear. But I am the story. That stuck with me like a nail through the sole of my foot. Because that's what he believed, that he belonged in our lives. That even as a shadow, even as a threat, he deserved to be part of our story. Like some twisted author who couldn't stand being edited out. We scanned the notebook. Sent it to Carter with a short message, found this behind the fence. We think he left it. He replied the next day, it's him. He's unraveling, but not in the way you'd hope. He's organizing something. Then, there's a line in here I don't like. He quoted it. They think the house protects them. But they forgot, I built half that house. We all sat in silence when we read that. Because it was true. Back when Chris and Mom were still together, we'd started renovating parts of the old place. Chris did a lot of it himself, flooring, drywall, even some of the foundation work in the basement. He knew that house. He knew the weak points, the crawl spaces, the parts you forget exist until something breaks. That night, we checked the basement. Everything looked normal, until Noah noticed the vent. A long, narrow air duct near the floor, half hidden behind the water heater. The screws were loose. Not recently, but clearly tampered with. And behind the duct, wedged inside, a piece of cloth. We pulled it out. An old DQ work shirt. Stiff with age. Stuffed inside the sleeve was another penny. Face down. That was when it stopped being unsettling. That was when it turned personal. He wasn't just watching. He'd been here. Maybe not recently, but at some point, after he was gone. We called Carter. Again. This time, he came in person. Took photos, measurements. Documented everything. He said he'd escalate it, push the police harder. They've been dragging their feet. This is different. Mom still didn't know about the notebook. Or the vent. We kept it from her. Not out of disrespect, out of protection. Her nerves were already threadbare. If she knew Chris had physically entered the house again, I wasn't sure she'd sleep another night. And yet, she knew something was coming. You could see it in how she moved. How she flinched when the kettle clicked. How she left the porch light on now, even when the blinds were closed. Then one afternoon, while I was out grabbing groceries, she called. I picked up immediately. Her voice was tight, low. Almost a whisper. There's someone in the backyard. I nearly dropped my phone. Don't hang up, I said. Where are you? In the laundry room, she said. He's near the trees. I can't see his face. But he's just standing. I told her to lock the door. Stay low. Then I called Noah. He was closer. He got there before me. By the time we arrived, the yard was empty. But the grass had been stepped on. 2 footprints, near the edge of the trees. And on the back porch? A string. Thin. Twine. Tied in a loop. Dangling from the doorknob like a snare. Not a noose. Not a trap. A message. Noah took it down gently. Bagged it. Jess showed up 20 minutes later. By then, Mom was pale but calm, sipping water. Her hands didn't shake. But her eyes were dark. I want a gun, she said. No one corrected her. No one reminded her of laws or permits. Because when your peace of mind has been dragged through the mud, logic takes a back seat to fear. That night, Steve came over. He didn't talk much. Just kept his hand on Mom's back while she sat on the couch. At one point, he looked at me and said, "This ends now." I nodded. He didn't mean it as a threat. He meant it as a promise. The next morning, Steve was already at the table when I came downstairs. Coffee in front of him, dark circles under his eyes, hands clasped tight like he was praying or planning, maybe both. He looked up. I found something. That snapped me awake faster than any coffee could. He reached into his coat and pulled out an old phone. It was in the glove box of Mom's car, he said. Not hers. And it wasn't there yesterday. I stared at it. Black. Beat up. One of those prepaid burner types you can still get at sketchy gas stations. It was off. Jess arrived 20 minutes later, Noah right behind her. We gathered around the table, the phone in the center like it was some ancient artifact none of us wanted to touch. Steve finally broke the silence. I think he planted it. We didn't argue. Not even for a second. Noah powered it on, hands shaking slightly. No passcode. No wallpaper. Just a grid of apps, bare bones. No SIM card. No texts. But there were photos. 9 of them. And the first one made my stomach twist. It was our house. Taken from across the street. Not from a car, this was eye level. Pedestrian. In person. The next photo. Mom. Standing in the kitchen, unaware. Shot through the window. Another, me, unloading groceries. Then Noah, taking out the trash. Jess. Sitting on the front steps with her phone, head down. They weren't recent. We could tell by the clothes. But they weren't old either. They were within the last 2 months. One more showed the inside of our living room, taken from outside, through the blinds. Meaning he had been close. Meaning he knew when the lights were on. When the blinds were slightly open. The last photo. A close-up. A penny. Sitting on our mailbox. Face down. I almost dropped the phone. Jess whispered, "He's playing with us. Like this is all some slow, sick performance." Carter came by an hour later. He didn't ask for coffee. Didn't sit down. He scanned through the phone, took photos, bagged it. "This changes everything," he said. "They can't ignore it now. We gave the police everything. The photos, the location of the vent stash, the string on the doorknob. They promised to send someone by for regular patrols. Told us to stay vigilant." Vigilant? We were sleeping in shifts. We weren't living anymore. We were bracing. That night, Steve stayed over again. He took the couch. Said it made him feel better to be near the door. I stayed up with him until almost 3 a.m., half watching a movie, half watching the window. "You think he's ever going to stop?" I asked. Steve didn't answer right away. Then he said, "No. I don't. But people like him, they're not built for the long game. They rot from the inside out. All we have to do is survive him. That phrase stuck with me. Survive him. Not defeat. Not erase. Just outlast. Like waiting for a storm to pass, knowing it might take your roof. The next day, the fifth penny appeared. This one was the worst. Because it wasn't at the house. It was at my work. I found it tucked into my locker. Inside, at the very back, under my spare shirt. Face down. I didn't tell my boss why I left early. I didn't even clock out. I just drove. Didn't know where I was going until I pulled into the driveway. Noah was already home. Jess too. They saw my face and didn't ask. I handed the penny to Carter in a Ziploc bag. He shook his head slowly. He's not trying to hurt you, he said. Not yet. Then what is this? Jess asked. A game? Carter's voice went flat. No. It's a narrative. He's building it piece by piece. Every note. Every penny. Every silent moment. He's not just watching, he's writing. That chilled me deeper than anything else. Because I knew Carter was right. Chris wasn't just trying to insert himself back into our lives. He was trying to become the story. And that meant he wasn't close to finished. The days blurred. Time lost its shape. Morning, night, noon, it didn't matter anymore. The hours were just checkpoints between one bad feeling and the next. We started speaking in half sentences. You see? No. Just a squirrel. Did you lock? Yeah. Twice. It was like we were trying to keep our sanity in place by not saying too much out loud. Because saying it made it real. Gave it mass. And we were already carrying too much. Then, just when it felt like things had plateaued, he sent a package. No return address. Just dropped at the front door in a plain manila envelope, sealed with clear tape. It wasn't thick. Thin enough to bend slightly in the middle. But the moment I picked it up, I knew it wasn't safe. Inside? Photos. Printed ones. Some were just copies of the same ones we'd seen on the burner phone. But others were worse. There was one of Mom and Steve. Sitting close together on the back porch, under the string lights. Laughing. Unaware. Another of Jess, asleep in the sunroom. Her head tilted back, mouth slightly open. Curtains cracked just enough to see her. Then Noah, bending over to tie his shoe near the side gate. Camera angle tilted, like it had been taken from a crouch. And then, me. Sleeping. My room. My bed. Taken from the crack of my door. My heart stopped. I stared at it for what felt like an hour. Couldn't even blink. Because I lock my door. Every night. I check it. I push on it. I make sure. So how? When? What the hell does it mean if he'd been inside again? I didn't say anything. Not at first. I just walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and threw up. When I came back, Jess was already on the phone with Carter. Noah was flipping through the photos with gloves, using tweezers like they were contaminated. Mom hadn't seen them yet. We waited until Steve arrived before showing her. She didn't say a word. Didn't cry. She just sat very still and stared at the photo of me sleeping. Then, calmly, she reached for the kitchen scissors and began cutting each picture into pieces. Tiny ones. Bits of nothing. She didn't stop until they were confetti. Then she said, "This ends now. I don't care what it takes." That night, we stayed in the same room. All of us. Living room lights dimmed. Front and back doors locked, double-barred. Phones fully charged. Panic alarm close. It was like preparing for a hurricane. No one really slept. Somewhere around 2 a.m., we heard something. Not loud. Just a thump. From the attic. At first, we all froze. Stared at the ceiling like it was going to speak. Then Noah stood up, slow and deliberate, and grabbed the broom handle. "I'm checking." Jess hissed, "Don't be a hero." He didn't answer. Just climbed the steps to the hallway. I followed. Couldn't let him go alone. We reached the attic hatch. Stared at it. There was a smear of dust on the ceiling around the frame. Fresh. Noah pulled the cord. The ladder dropped. No creak. No squeal. Just silence. We climbed. The attic was exactly what you'd expect, dusty, musty, filled with old Christmas bins and forgotten boxes. The kind of place you only enter when you're looking for something you barely remember owning. But this time, something was off. One of the insulation panels near the far wall was shifted. Noah pointed. We crawled over. Behind the panel? A plastic grocery bag. Inside? Empty beer cans. A tattered hoodie. A disposable camera. And a note. "You never changed the locks." It was written in Sharpie, on the back of an old DQ napkin. That was the moment I felt something snap in my chest. We had changed the locks. We had. Just not the attic latch. That meant at some point, days, weeks, maybe even longer, Chris had been living in our attic. Watching. Crawling down when we weren't home. Taking photos. Moving through our lives like we were his personal stage show. And we never knew. Never heard him. Never felt him. We took the bag down like it was nuclear. Carter came before dawn. He took everything. Scanned every inch of the attic. Called in a favor with a buddy on the force to get a warrant. Finally, the police agreed to treat it as a break-in. Trespassing. Harassment. Still not enough for jail time. But enough to hunt. Enough to corner him. And for the first time, we weren't afraid. We were ready. The next 2 days felt like a coil winding tighter and tighter, waiting for that final snap. Carter was in and out. The police had finally moved past sympathy and into action. They canvassed the neighborhood. Questioned people. Even knocked on the door of the vacant house 2 lots down. No one answered, but someone had been there. The trash bin was half full. Water was running in short bursts. A porch light turned off around 3 a.m. every night. The cop who checked it said the locks were old, easy to pick. But with no proof, no name, they couldn't break the door down. Jess wasn't having it. "He's right there," she hissed. "We're wasting time. He's living next door like it's a rental and we're the entertainment." Carter agreed, but law is law. Until he slipped, we were stuck waiting. So we watched. We kept our curtains closed. Set motion alerts. Jess started sleeping during the day and staying up all night, watching the monitors in real time. Then it happened. The break we needed. It was 2:47 a.m. The front camera caught movement, someone in a hoodie stepping onto our porch. But this time, he didn't just leave a penny. He pulled out a small can of spray paint. White. Uncapped it. And started to scrawl something across the door. But the moment the spray hit the wood, a spotlight snapped on from the yard. Noah's addition. One of those motion-triggered floodlights, angled perfectly. Chris froze. Not like someone startled. Like a man caught mid-thought, mid-plan. Just stood there with the can in hand, half a word sprayed onto the door. That was the moment Jess opened the door. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She just stared at him. He didn't move. Didn't run. Didn't flinch. And then, just like that, he turned, dropped the can, and walked. Walked. Not ran. Not scrambled. Just calmly stepped down the porch and disappeared into the dark. But this time? We had it all on camera. Carter got the footage. Delivered it himself to the officer who had been stonewalling us for weeks. By noon the next day, they had a search warrant for the house 2 lots down. They entered at 4 p.m. Inside, one mattress on the floor. Half a dozen empty beer bottles. A camping stove. And a corkboard covered in newspaper clippings. About us. About Mom. Photos from our Facebook accounts printed out and marked with dates. One article, taped dead center, local woman speaks out on manager misconduct, sparks community policy review. It was Mom's interview. From 3 years ago. Back when she had finally shared what Chris had done. Quietly. Without names. But enough to push change in the workplace. It had gone semi-viral in our town. And clearly, he'd seen it. There was more. Notes. Plans. Maps. Even a fake ID with Chris's photo under a different name. And pinned right in the middle? A note. One line. You ruined my life. I'll take yours one piece at a time. They arrested him that night. No dramatics. No chase. He was walking out of a gas station when they took him down. He didn't resist. Didn't even look surprised. As if this was always part of the plan. They found more in his car. A box of printed photos. Another disposable camera. A bag of pennies. Face down. That night, we opened the windows for the first time in months. Mom slept through the night. We still checked the locks. Still kept the cameras rolling. But it felt different. Like the static in the air had finally cleared. We were still tense. Still shaken. But something inside had shifted. We weren't prey anymore. We were survivors. And he was done. You'd think once someone like Chris is behind bars, you'd feel safe. Like the credits would roll. Final shot. Fade to black. But that's not how it works. Because even with him locked up, his absence still had weight. It hung in the air like dust after demolition, silent but suffocating. We all felt it. The tension didn't break. It just shifted. Became quieter. Twitchier. The kind of thing you carry in your shoulders without realizing. Like your body is still waiting for a door to creak open in the dark. Jess stopped sleeping during the day. But she didn't stop checking the cameras. Noah started double-checking every window. Even ones on the second floor. Mom? She barely spoke for the first week. Not in a sad way, just empty. Like she'd finally turned the last page of a book she never wanted to read, and didn't know what to do with the silence that followed. Steve was around constantly. Helping with the repairs, replacing the door Chris had marked with spray paint. We never finished removing the word, just repainted the whole thing. The first letter still bled through a little. A ghost of it. Carter helped us file for a restraining order anyway. Paperwork, logistics, victim statements. The whole nine. But what stuck with me most was how it ended. In the courtroom. I went with Mom. Chris didn't speak. Didn't look at us. He just sat there in his orange jumpsuit, hands in his lap, like this was traffic court. Like he wasn't the reason we hadn't slept in months. But the worst part? He smiled again. That same dead-eyed smile he gave the camera on our porch. I wanted to lunge across the benches. To yell. To scream. But Mom just held my wrist. Don't, she whispered. Her voice was steady. Calm. She was done giving him the satisfaction of our pain. After the hearing, we got lunch at a quiet cafe on the other side of town. Just me, Mom, and Steve. No cameras. No shadows. Just quiet. Mom ordered soup. Took a deep breath and said, I never told you this, but I always knew it would end like this. I looked at her. You mean with him in jail? She shook her head. No. I mean with us. Together. Without him. That hit harder than I expected. Because after everything, she wasn't angry. She wasn't broken. She was free. Later that week, Noah finally threw out the hammer he kept under his bed. Jess deleted the security app from her phone. And me? I went back to work. Normal things felt weird at first. The hum of the break room microwave. The sound of coworkers laughing at things that didn't feel funny to me yet. I smiled anyway. One morning, I found a small note in my locker. It wasn't signed. Just 5 words. He doesn't own your story. I asked around, nobody admitted to leaving it. But it didn't matter. Because it was true. Chris was gone. And we were still here. And every day after that, we were 1 inch further from his shadow. 3 weeks passed. Quiet weeks. That alone felt unnatural, like life had forgotten to add the background noise. No footsteps outside at midnight. No anonymous envelopes. No pennies on the porch. For the first time in a long time, we started to act normal again. Jess reactivated her social media. Noah started planning a short trip with some friends. Mom was painting again. And me? I finally unpacked the last box in my room, the one I'd never touched since we moved in. It had Chris's handwriting on the side. From back when things were still new. I ripped the label off and threw it out without even opening the box. Then I filled it with old stuff to donate. Let it go. But healing's strange. It doesn't happen like a sunrise, bright, full, immediate. It comes in pieces. Moments. And sometimes, reminders. It started with the newspaper. Steve brought it in, as usual, folded under his arm, warm from the sun. Nothing special. Until Mom picked it up and froze. She didn't say a word at first. Just stared at the front page. Then she handed it to me. A small article. Bottom corner. Just a few lines. Former DQ manager found competent to stand trial, set for hearing in September. There was no photo. No full name. But we knew. And what caught me wasn't the news itself, it was the wording. Competent. Like they'd doubted it. Like there had been a question. Mom set the paper down. I don't want to follow this, she said. I don't care what happens in court. I just want it over. Jess, who had been sipping coffee, quietly added, it is over. But the silence after said otherwise. Because here's the truth people don't talk about. When someone like Chris inserts himself into your life, your home, he doesn't leave cleanly. Even when he's gone, his absence echoes. You feel it in your routines. In the way you check the locks twice before bed. In the way you hesitate to turn off the porch light. In the way your heart skips at any knock you weren't expecting. But life did start moving. We even had a cookout. Small. Just us and a couple of Steve's old friends. Laughter, music, burgers on the grill. It was light, finally. Until I went inside to grab more plates, and the hallway lights flickered. Not off. Just a pulse. Once. Then normal. The kind of thing you'd ignore. But I stopped. Because that hallway light? That was on its own circuit. And we just had the wiring redone. I didn't say anything. Not that night. But later, I checked the fuse box. Nothing tripped. Nothing wrong. Still, I couldn't shake it. Because fear doesn't need facts to survive. All it needs is suggestion. And Chris had planted so many of those, they'd taken root deep in the corners of my mind. The next morning, Jess told me she'd had a dream. Said she was back in the old house, but the rooms kept shifting, like she couldn't find her way out. Every door led to the attic. And when she finally opened the hatch, Chris wasn't there. We were. Trapped. Looking up at him. She laughed when she said it. Brushed it off. But her hands were trembling just a little when she poured her coffee. Trauma does that. Turns ordinary things into landmines. Turns memories into quicksand. It would take time. Maybe a lifetime. But we were still standing. And that mattered. 2 months. That's how long it took for life to almost feel real again. We'd settled into a rhythm. Days filled with errands, little chores, and soft, forgettable silences. Mom was sleeping again, deep, dreamless sleep. The kind where her face finally looked rested. Steve started talking about weekend trips. Jess got promoted. Noah moved into an apartment 10 minutes away. Even I started to feel, I don't know, whole. But you don't notice what's healing until it gets poked again. It was a Tuesday. One of those boring, cloud-hung days where everything feels muted. I was helping Mom clean out the hall closet. Old blankets, shoes nobody wore anymore, a box of VHS tapes we didn't even have a player for. And then, wedged between a folded beach chair and a stack of magazines, a small envelope. Plain white. No name. I held it up. You recognize this? Mom looked over, shook her head. Probably junk mail I stuffed in there. But something felt wrong. The way the envelope was wedged so deliberately. Tucked in with care, like it wanted to be found, but not too easily. I opened it. Inside was a single photo. It was me. Recent. Sitting in my car, parked outside the grocery store. Looking down at my phone. Caught in profile. Taken from the passenger side window. Only I'd been alone. I felt my knees go weak. Mom saw my face and grabbed the photo. Her voice dropped into something low and shaking. When was this? I don't know. Last week? I don't remember. She didn't say anything else. Just walked into the kitchen, pulled out the junk drawer, and began flipping through every envelope, every scrap of mail, every unpaid bill. No more photos. No more envelopes. Just that one. But it was enough. Because it raised the question we'd stopped asking. Was he still out there? And if not him, someone else? Someone following in his footsteps? I showed Jess. She went pale. Didn't say a word. Just opened her laptop and started pulling up camera feeds again. Ones we hadn't checked in weeks. Noah came by that night. He stared at the photo in silence. Then said, "You think he sent it?" "No," Jess said. "I think he taught someone how." We all turned to her. She closed the laptop. "Look at what we've been through. The notebooks. The photos. The messages. That's not random behavior. That's ritual." Noah rubbed his face. "You think he has a copycat?" Jess didn't answer. Just held up the envelope. "There's no fingerprint on this. No saliva. Whoever sent this knew what they were doing." It felt like the walls were closing in again. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, blinds open, watching the street. Every car slowed down too much. Every shadow looked deliberate. And the worst part? There were no footsteps this time. No knock. No penny. Just silence. Heavy and deliberate. Like someone was waiting. 3 nights after the photo showed up, Jess knocked on my door at 1:18 a.m. No words, just that look on her face. Tired. Sharp. Frightened in the way you only get when something is too quiet. She held up her phone. "Motion alert," she whispered. I followed her downstairs. We moved like ghosts, careful not to wake Mom. The living room glowed with the light from the monitor. She played the clip. It was from the camera above the driveway. 30 seconds long. In the grainy night vision footage, a figure stepped into frame. Slow. Confident. They didn't come close. Didn't look at the door. Just stood near the edge of the lawn, under the maple tree. And then? They bent down. Set something on the grass. And walked away. We stared at the screen until it looped. Jess and I exchanged a look. Neither of us spoke. Outside, the air felt electric. Cold in a way it hadn't been all week. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped onto the porch, Jess right behind me. We didn't have to look long. The object was small. Wrapped in tissue paper. I crouched, hands trembling just a little, and peeled it open. A photo. Black and white. Old. Someone's living room. Crooked furniture. Floral wallpaper. A baby in a car seat, slightly out of focus. On the back? A line of faded handwriting. Start at the beginning. I felt a chill run down my spine. We brought it inside, laid it flat under the lamp. Jess took a picture and sent it to Noah, who replied immediately. That's Mom. In the photo. That's her first apartment. We confirmed it the next day. Mom recognized it right away. That wallpaper had haunted her for years. The place she'd rented before we were born. She whispered, "Where did you find this?" over and over, like she didn't believe it was real. We didn't tell her everything, not yet. Just that someone left it, and we were looking into it. But I knew what that message meant. This wasn't about Chris anymore. It was about before him. Before the notebook. Before the attic. Before the betrayal. Someone was reaching back, pulling things out of the past like old wounds that never fully healed. And whoever they were, they knew us. Noah dug deeper. Searched for photo archives, birth records, anything he could find. He called Carter too. Carter sounded different this time. Tired. On edge. This isn't his style, he said. If it was Chris, he'd want you to know. This is someone playing long-term. Someone who wants you to question everything. I asked him if we were in danger. His pause was long enough to say yes. Then he said, "It's not always the person knocking that's the problem. Sometimes it's the one who never had to." That stuck with me. Because there are people who make noise. And then there are the ones who operate in the quiet. Careful. Patient. Calculating. And now I was starting to think, maybe Chris wasn't the root of all of it. Maybe he was just the match. And someone else had already stacked the kindling. 2 days later, Noah showed up with a folder under his arm and the kind of expression that made me brace myself. He'd been digging. Hard. I went to the records office, he said, setting the folder on the dining table like it was a loaded secret. Looked into Mom's rental history. You know, from back when we were little. I leaned in. Jess was already there, quiet. First apartment checks out, Noah continued. Same address from the photo. But there's something else. Before that place, before we existed, she had another unit. One she never talked about. He pulled out a copy of an old lease. Name on the lease matches her maiden name. Rented for 11 months in a duplex about 30 minutes from here. She'd have been around 19. Just out of high school. Jess furrowed her brow. She told me she moved in with Dad right after graduation. Exactly, Noah said. But this place? It was before him. The room went still. I could feel it in my chest, that slow, thick weight of realization sinking in. What are you saying? I asked. Noah flipped to another paper. I looked into the property. The landlord was a woman named Irene Halverson. Passed away in 2009. But guess who bought the duplex a year after Mom moved out? He let the silence sit. Jess's voice broke it. Chris. Noah nodded once. Under a different name. Not legally changed, but used. Signed the deed as Evan Mercer. It's one of the aliases the police found in that notebook from the attic. My mouth went dry. Are you saying Chris knew Mom before she married Dad? Jess whispered it like she was trying not to hear the answer. I don't think they ever met, Noah said. But he knew of her. He was watching her before she even knew who he was. The table felt miles wide all of a sudden. I looked down at the black and white photo again, the baby, the wallpaper, the moment frozen in time. Jess reached for it. Flipped it over. Start at the beginning. And suddenly, everything snapped into place. Chris hadn't been acting out of rage when Mom kicked him out. He hadn't spiraled just because she left. This wasn't reaction. This was long-form obsession. Something deeper. Older. Something that predated us. Jess stood up. We need to talk to Mom. We found her in the backyard, watering her tomatoes. She looked up and smiled, like she didn't feel the storm building around her. Got another flower on the vine, she said softly. It's going to be a good year. We sat her down and told her everything. The lease. The photo. The connection. At first, she was quiet. Then, her face went pale. Irene Halverson, she whispered. That name. God. I haven't heard that in decades. She closed her eyes. I was 17. Fresh out of school. Ran away from home for a bit. My dad had started drinking again, and I just couldn't take it. That part we knew. She opened her eyes. I found the ad for the room in a corner shop window. Irene was kind. Strange, but kind. There was a boy next door. Kept to himself. Always out late. But I never spoke to him. Jess's hand tightened around mine. Did you ever see him? She thought. Not really. Just glimpses. At night. He wore headphones a lot. Hood up. I remember once I dropped my keys and he picked them up, left them on the porch without saying a word. Noah asked, could that have been Chris? Mom shook her head. I don't know. But, after I left that place, I never went back. It gave me the creeps. And then, something flickered in her expression. She stood. Walked inside. We followed. She pulled an old shoebox from the hallway closet. The kind that smelled like time. Inside were faded photos, receipts, birthday cards from before we were born. And tucked at the bottom? A torn envelope. No address. No stamp. Inside? A note. Written in scratchy blue ink, dated almost 30 years ago. You looked right through me. I saw you long before you saw yourself. You're not done with me. Not yet. Mom stared at the paper. I thought it was just a weird letter. Didn't think it meant anything. I said nothing. Because it meant everything. Chris hadn't just entered our lives by accident. He'd been circling us for decades. Waiting. Watching. And now? Someone else had picked up the thread. The next morning started with a scream. Jess. Not fear, rage. The kind that starts deep in your throat and burns on its way out. I ran down the hall, heart pounding. She was standing in the entryway, staring at the front door. Noah was already there. Frozen. And Mom was silent. Her lips pressed together, trembling. Because taped to the front door was another photo. Only this one wasn't grainy. It wasn't distant. It wasn't some old memory dug up from the past. It was us. From yesterday. Sitting in the living room, talking. You could see Jess's arm mid-gesture, Noah's face half-turned toward me, Mom blurry in the background holding a cup of tea. Taken from inside the house. It was angled downward, like from a vent or a high corner. Like a security cam, but we didn't have one pointing there. Not from that angle. Not ever. I felt cold crawl up my spine, like someone had just opened a door behind me. Jess yanked the photo down. This isn't possible. Noah was already pulling out his phone, calling Carter. I walked the perimeter of the house. Checked every vent, every gap in the wall, every smoke detector. Nothing. Nothing except a small, freshly cut circle in the ceiling of the laundry room. It wasn't big, 3 inches, maybe 4. Tidy. Drywall dust still faint on the floor beneath it. I called the others in. Jess climbed the step stool and peered in with a flashlight. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then, slowly, she reached up and pulled something out. A tiny pinhole camera. Battery pack. Wi-Fi capable. Hidden behind the insulation. None of us could breathe. This wasn't here a week ago, she said. I checked everything after the last letter. Then someone's been inside. My voice sounded far away. Mom sat down slowly on the stairs, one hand over her mouth. I looked at her. Do you have your keys? She nodded. Always? Another nod. We checked the locks. The windows. Every latch. Every camera. Nothing showed signs of forced entry. But someone had been here. Someone had watched us from the inside. And they hadn't taken anything. They hadn't hurt anyone. They'd just left a message. Jess handed the camera to Carter an hour later. He took it without a word and promised he'd find something. A fingerprint, a trace, a signal. But deep down, we all knew, whoever was doing this wasn't going to be that careless. This wasn't about breaking in. This was about breaking down. Psychologically. Emotionally. They were trying to unravel us from the inside out. To make us question our space. Our memory. Ourselves. And I'll admit it, it started to work. Every corner of the house felt dangerous. Every mirror a threat. Every silence filled with the suggestion of breath just beyond our field of view. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I walked room to room, checking vents. I opened every drawer. Pulled back every curtain. At 3:41 a.m., I paused at the back window. Outside, the garden swayed softly in the wind. And then, right at the edge of the bushes, I saw it. A figure. Not moving. Just standing. Watching. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Just stood there, pressed against the window frame, eyes locked on the figure in the yard. Not tall. Not bulky. Just present. Still as stone. No flashlight. No phone. No movement. Just watching. Behind me, the floor creaked. Jess. I didn't have to say anything. She followed my gaze and saw him too. She whispered, I'm calling Carter. But even as she said it, the figure turned. Not toward us, toward the fence. Then it was gone. Gone in a way that made me question if it was ever really there. But it was. I know it was. Carter was there within 20 minutes. They canvassed the yard. Found faint impressions in the dirt near the back fence, like someone had stood in place long enough to compress the grass. No shoe tread. No evidence left behind. Just that absence. The rest of the night passed in a fog. The air in the house had changed. Heavier. Less hours. By morning, Noah had reinstalled every camera. Jess moved back in temporarily. Steve stayed over too, silent, angry, like something inside him was coming loose. Mom didn't say much. Just sipped her tea and stared into it like it might give her answers the rest of us couldn't. That afternoon, Carter called. Got something, he said. The voice on the other end was taut. Flat. We traced a Wi-Fi ping from the camera. It uploaded files to a shared network for a few seconds before the battery died. I leaned in. And? There were 5 video clips. 4 of them are surveillance footage from inside your house. Short. Quiet. Date stamped between last Sunday and Tuesday. I swallowed. And the 5th? Pause. A room. Someone holding the camera, walking in. White walls. A bed. Folded chair in the corner. Someone sitting in the chair, facing away. You can't see their face. He lowered his voice. But there's a sound. What kind of sound? He hesitated. Someone whispering your name. The line buzzed with silence. "I'm coming over," Carter said. "We need to talk." He showed up that evening with a laptop and the footage. We watched it together, huddled in the living room. Lights off. The last video, the one with the person in the chair, it was like something from a dream. The person holding the camera whispered something, inaudible. Then stepped closer. And closer. Until we could see the back of the chair. Hair. A shoulder. Then a voice. Not the person holding the camera. The one sitting. A low, broken whisper. "I'm sorry." Jess flinched. Mom gasped. Because it wasn't Chris. It was a woman's voice. And not just any woman. It was Mom's voice. But Mom was sitting beside us. We turned to her. She looked like someone had drained all the blood from her face. I don't remember that." I whispered, "Are you sure?" She just stared at the screen. "Where was that filmed?" I asked Carter. "We're working on it," he said. "We think it might be a staged space. Could be anywhere. A storage unit. A trailer. No identifying marks." Jess was shaking now. "What does it mean?" I said nothing. Because I already knew. This wasn't about obsession anymore. This was about identity. About history. Someone was rewriting it. Inserting cracks. Building doubt. Piece by piece. Until we didn't know where our own story began anymore. We watched the video again. Slower this time. Paused at each frame. The chair. The hair. The slope of the shoulder. The faint tremble in the fingers. Jess pulled the screen closer. "That bracelet," she murmured. "Mom, is that yours?" Mom blinked. Looked at the wrist. A delicate silver chain with 3 tiny beads. Her hand went to her own wrist instinctively, bare. "I had one just like that," she said. "Years ago. But I lost it after we moved in with Chris. I thought it fell behind the sink." Noah exhaled hard through his nose. Jess whispered what we were all thinking, so, either someone dressed her double, or someone's been inside longer than we thought. Carter said nothing. Because there was no good answer. Either possibility was terrifying. I stood up. I couldn't sit still anymore. Let's say someone did recreate that room. Let's say they dressed someone up. Mom's voice could be an audio clip, right? Something pulled from an old home video. Carter nodded. "Technically, yeah. So what's the point? What are they doing with it?" His voice was grave. "They're trying to destabilize you." I laughed under my breath, sharp. "Yeah. That part's working." Carter leaned forward. "No, I mean more than just scare you. They're working towards something. Setting a stage. Controlling the narrative." He looked at the rest of us. "And we've been letting them." That night, we made a plan. We were going to fight back. But not with rage. Not with traps or panic. With silence. With watching. Because whoever this was, they thrived on being ahead of us. So we gave them what they wanted, the illusion of control. We left a single door unlocked, the garage side entrance. And waited. 2 nights later, they came. 2:19 a.m. I heard the creak. The faint brush of a jacket against the frame. From where I was hiding in the hall closet, I saw it all through the tiny air slit in the door. A person. Medium build. Hood up. Face obscured. They moved confidently. Like they'd been here before. They weren't looking to steal. They were placing something. A box. Wrapped in brown paper. Tied with string. They set it on the dining table. Then turned. And froze. Because every light in the house came on at once. Noah. Jess. Me. Carter. All standing, silent. The figure didn't run. Didn't speak. Just lowered the hood. And everything I thought I knew about this story cracked open. It wasn't Chris. It wasn't some stranger. It was Betty. Her eyes were wide. Not shocked. Not even afraid. Just empty. Like someone who'd finally finished digging up the last grave and had nothing left to hide. Jess whispered, "Why?" Betty didn't answer. Carter stepped forward. Hands where I can see them. Still, she didn't move. She just looked at Mom. And said, "He chose you first. But he loved me better." Then she smiled, small. Almost sad. And whispered, "Now you understand." We didn't. Not fully. Not until Carter opened the box. Inside were more photos. Notes. Video clips. A list of addresses. Names we didn't recognize. And a second notebook, almost identical to the one Chris had kept. Except this one was dated before they ever met. Before he was arrested. Before any of us were old enough to understand the weight of obsession. Betty had been there the whole time. In the background. Watching. Waiting. She wasn't the copycat. She was the origin. Chris hadn't created the pattern. She had. And he'd learned from her. We gave our statements. Carter made the calls. She was taken in, silent as stone. The house was quiet again. But it wasn't the same. The air was different now, not haunted. Empty. The kind of silence that follows the end of something vast and hidden. A silence we could breathe in again. Mom slept through the night. Jess went home. Noah smiled without it looking like a lie. And me? I sat in the backyard one last time. Looked at the sky. And thought about all the things we'd never know. But one thing stayed with me. Clear as anything. He didn't choose us by accident. None of it was chance. Because long before Chris ever walked into our lives, we were already being watched.